Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our live panel discussion today on navigating food regulations and their impact on product development. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to be here as I'm joined by some industry thought leaders who are going to share their perspectives on this landscape. For those of you who haven't seen me before, I'm Martha. I lead the marketing function at Ulrick and Short, and I'm going to host you throughout today's panel. If you don't know who Ulrick and Short are, then we are designers and suppliers of clean label functional food ingredients. Our ingredient range has been developed to provide innovative solutions for manufacturers to overcome NPD challenges, whether that's nutritional reformulation, addressing processing challenges, or improving textures. We do this through working consultatively with our customers, and we take a really hands-on approach from initial concept all the way through to launch. So with me today, as I mentioned, I'm joined with some food industry experts. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and give an overview of their expertise. So first up, we have our own technical field support, Sebastian Stockloser.
Hi, good morning everyone and welcome to our webinar. My name is Sebastian. I work for Ulrick & Short as a technical sales. I look after customers across England, helping them, making the most out of our clean label ingredients. Again, nice to welcome you on board, and I look forward to discussion today.
Thanks, Sebastian. Next up, we have John Jones, who is the co-founder and director at It's Food.
Thanks, Martha. Thanks for having us. So It's Food is a product development and innovation agency. We work with food manufacturers, retailers, restaurant chains, startups, food artisans on all parts of product development, either from strategy or concept to launch product. My background is I've had 10 years at Marks & Spencer working in the product development function and culinary, but I'm a chef by trade, so I'm all about the product, about quality, deliciousness. That's what drives me and my co-founder forward. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, John. And finally, we've got Lewis Wallace, who is the Regulatory Affairs Advisor at Camden BRI.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, as Martha says, I'm a Regulatory Affairs Advisor at Camden. I work with a lot of our members or the client, advising on pretty much every regulatory topic that you can think of as it relates to food. So that includes more general topics like labelling and claims, but right the way through to specialist areas like allergens, contaminants, and nutrition policy, which my particular interests. So anything related to HFSS, UPF, and all of those related acronyms typically falls under my expertise.
Amazing. Thank you, Lewis. And thanks to all our panelists for being here today. So over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to dive into the role of regulation, the impact on consumer behaviour, the effectiveness of past regulations, and we're also going to look at the regulatory landscape in 2025 and beyond. Please feel free to pop any questions that you might have in the Q&A box, and if we have time, we will answer these at the end. If not, we will direct your question to the relevant person who will be in touch after this live panel. You will also all be receiving a recording of the discussion today, so feel free to watch this back or send it to anyone that you think it's relevant for. So starting off, thinking about the role that regulation plays and looking at regulation a little bit more holistically. Lewis, why are regulatory measures necessary in the food industry, and how do they help ensure public health and safety?
Yeah, it's such a good question for kicking off. And yeah, I always try and think of this. So imagine a world where we've not got food regulation, where you've got potential for manufacturers. They might be able to use ingredients that we don't know if they're safe or not. They might use claims or information that's not necessarily true or accurate. And for me, that just opens up potential for profiting off of unsafe foods that are potentially misleading. So really, regulations in place to provide those guardrails and provide that more level playing field so that food is safe and not misleading. And I think with regulations, I mean, that splits pretty much into two areas where you've got your more foundational regulations, which are all about ensuring food safety, and whether that's safety of ingredients and safety of additives. but also regulations on food labelling. So your FIC, as we call it in the EU, which is about making sure that all information is accurate. So I think those are more foundational regs that are super important and form the basis. But now we've seen a lot more regulation coming into force more recently that's addressing new challenges. So those challenges like nutrition and health. So as we've seen with HFSS restrictions, sustainability is a big one. So in the EU, we've seen quite a big push on actions like green claims or deforestation. I think digital as well. Digital is quite a big topic that's emerging, and a lot of the legislation is more around online safety. But it's not to say that these nutrition and sustainability measures are not crossing over into that online space as well. But yeah, I think the foundation provides that safe and not misleading
structure. Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. And John, from your perspective, from previously working in retail, how have you seen regulations impact the industry and also impact kind of consumer shopper behaviour? Oh, sorry, you're just on mute, John.
Perfect, thank you. It was going to happen. Get that out of the way early. Yeah, so in the moment, often they're seen as a negative. These are just challenges for the industry that you have to overcome. Multiple hurdles, workarounds that add a huge amount of time. But actually, when I reflect back from some of the challenges that we've seen over the last sort of 5 years, they've been they've really pushed the industry forward from an ingredient innovation perspective, for creating gaps in the market, helping brands to push forward and create opportunities for smaller, more challengers to come in. So one, from an industry perspective, I think the movement and challenge of regulations is a really great and positive thing. But also for the consumer, we're taking them on a journey to be able to make healthier choices, or choices that are more sustainable, better for the world. So all of this is positive, and I just think when you reflect on those challenges that you had in the moment, of course they're difficult, but as an industry you kind of overcome them, and it really fuels innovation. And I think also when you get into the detail and the understanding of recipe formulation, of design and manufacture, as a culinary expert, it really drives me, because it's around that deep understanding of excellence and how to just make the best product possible. So yeah, I think it's a great thing and good for the industry.
Yeah, having a positive impact. So Sebastian, do you have any examples of projects or products that you've reformulated that have really been driven by regulatory requirements?
Sure, I think we could list them across our board on quite a significant list. I mean, I would probably start with the most significant one is all around sugar and salt reduction, which really kicked off in 2018 after sugar tax regulation. I think that was the quite a significant regulation change back then, which really sort of narrowed down the route of NPD going towards sort of being consistent with reducing sugars, fats and salt as a general. I think that sort of narrows down the sort of scope of projects that we've done, primarily working around reducing those main ingredients or solutions as such.
Yeah, you mentioned there about the sugar tax, Sebastian. So thinking about previous regulations, we've had various sugar, calorie, fat reduction targets, the sugar tax, out of home labelling that's come into force now. Lewis, in your experience, do you think these past food regulations have been successful in achieving their intended goal?
I think it's a bit of a mixed bag, and it depends which one you look at. Like Sebastian says, when you've got the soft drinks industry levy, that was a mandatory tax, and it puts a lot of pressure on reformulation, so it definitely drives it. Where you've got more voluntary measures, so as we've seen with salt and sugar reduction, you get mixed success. Salt seemed to work quite a bit, and sugar less so. I think in terms of out of home calorie labelling, still a bit of a jury's out. I've seen studies to suggest either way on its wider impact, but that was a mandatory focus. I think with HFSS restrictions in particular, we're still a bit too early to say. There's some amazing work going off by folks like Michelle Morris and Sally Moore that are really looking at this evaluation and is it having an impact on choices. But I think a key success that we've seen so far, and it comes back to John's point, is this reformulation drive. We've seen big manufacturers and big brands either create new products that are non-HFSS, so it increases those healthy options, but it also reformulating brands that we know and love to bring them into that non-HFSS healthier. I think there's definitely been impact, even if we've not seen the data on food choices as yet.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And John, when you were working at M&S, did you see or notice any kind of significant changes in consumer behaviour with the implementation of major regulation like the sugar tax?
I guess less so within foods. Drinks, as Lewis has touched on there, has been massive, been absolutely huge. You know, the big brands, the giants in that industry have had to do their best to reformulate. And what this has done is almost taken the category and really moved it on and blown it open. And that's allowed small brands to be able to come in and enter that market and do an unbelievable job. People like, you know, Hip Hop, Trip, Living Things, Dash have entered the market and have really started to, like, you know, nip at the heels of these giants and grow. You know, really great example is Poppy in the States just getting bought by Pepsi. Now they're actually making really big plays, and what I think has happened is it's had a massive effect. It's kind of fueled innovation, moved a category forward where people are looking for healthier choices. They're more clued up on what's going in the body, and then all of a sudden you've got, you know, opportunity for MPD, and it's great, and brands are doing it really, really, really successfully, and I really commend that. And I think actually this will happen in other parts of the industry as things change, and I commend that. And we work with similar businesses where we can immediately see the gap emerging in the market, and we can be, you know, small and agile enough to be able to do a great job and into that quickly. So yeah, I think it's fascinating and massive positive.
Yeah, definitely. Sebastian, on some kind of projects that you've worked on, whether it's reformulation or kind of meeting these regulatory challenges, what kind of hurdles or technical challenges have you faced or seen a customer face when developing products?
Sure. I think I can relate this to one particular project or a range of products where I was tasked to improve traffic light colors on the front of packaging of a particular snack product. And I think as a general, with those changes, the biggest challenge was around maintaining taste and texture when reducing key ingredients such as, again, sugar or salt. Again, you know, all this while maintaining the cost and ensuring the stability in manufacturing process, I think was the biggest sort of barrier to come across. But what I've learned from this particular projects was indeed the complexity associated with reducing key ingredients, but also the importance of understanding the role of such ingredients within the product, and then aiming at finding a substitute for those key functionalities of these ingredients to then try to reduce them to hit a specific nutritional target.
Yeah. And John, with your culinary background and your background in retail, have you find it challenging to kind of balance that product quality and that taste, as kind of Sebastian was talking about there, whilst meeting the regulatory requirements, whether that's kind of reducing sugar, reducing fat, calories, etc.?
It's incredibly challenging, because, you know, reformulation is really hard because you're taking something out that's there for flavor, it's there for structure, it's doing multiple things, and you need to isolate what it's doing, and find a solution. Now, everyone wants to believe that there's silver bullets, and there may be, but often you have to try and take marginal gains using ingredient innovation or process innovation to be able to get you to where you need to be. And also, I think, in the past it's been great because my approach has been reach out to people like yourselves, learn as much as I can, test and trial ingredients or processes for me to be able to be, to make informed decisions on product design. But once you've done that, it's just really hard. Like if you overlay that now with the UPF standpoint, hey, you've got to we're taking sugar out. It's still a store cupboard. It's recognizable, but we know we need to take it out. What we then replacing that with, it really throws a humongous challenge into reformulation and customers' perception, what you're adding in, what you're taking out. So it's all down to a product by product basis, and I'd love to say that you can make huge industry changes with one ingredient, but it's unfortunately not the case. There's a lot of hard work behind it.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've definitely seen that at Ulrick and Short as well. So moving on to speak about the regulatory landscape in 2025. Lewis, can you give us a bit of an overview on what kind of key regulatory changes are expected in 2025?
Yeah, I think we've got quite a few this year, particularly related to nutrition and sustainability. Of course, you've got HFSS restrictions, which feel like a bit like the never-ending story that's been going on for the past 5 years or more. So we see that fully come into force in October this year. So that will apply to TV and paid for online advertising, and it applies to volume as well as it already applies to location in store and online. I think sustainability, we've seen a bit of halt to that in the EU. There are still measures that are coming through, but that might get pushed towards next year. There is deforestation, which comes in towards the end of this year, and businesses will be preparing now. So it's definitely having an impact on reducing deforestation of certain crops and commodities like cocoa. And another area that we've seen change, so novel foods, we've seen streamlines in that authorization process, which for me are fairly minor because they reduce the time a little bit at the end of that process, but they don't change the detailed regulatory requirements that are undergoing. So yeah, I think they're the main focus areas. I think it'd be remiss as well not to mention the bread and flour fortification, because although it seems like such a small change to add folic acid to flour being milled, because of the widespread use of that ingredient, it's going to have a lot of labelling implications as millers start to add that folic acid. So I think that's a big one.
Yeah. And which of those do you see influencing product development the most, do you think?
I think it's got to be HFSS. I think and it's impacted for quite a few years now. We've seen so many brands that have done good work in this space. And like John says, amongst that backdrop and wider debate, wider confusion about UPF and ingredients, there's a lot of focus behind looking not just at nutrition, but that ingredient level. What does the consumer think? What should we be replacing it with? But also, what are the regulatory challenges? Because just because you can replace an ingredient doesn't necessarily mean that it's authorized for that use. You might have novel food implications. I think that is quite a big regulatory challenge.
Big challenge, yeah. And Johnny, are you seeing that with your customers as well? HFSS being kind of the big one.
Yeah, I mean, first thing we do with any project that we have is look at it through the regulatory lens, so we can, advise appropriately, because we could be you have to take a bit of a view, but if we're talking about long-term innovation pipeline and strategy, then you kind of need to bear it in mind. Although there's a huge amount of twists and turns, you have to bear that in mind. And I think we've got some really big live examples where the HFSS guidelines are creating some significant challenges. The change on and what it means for brands, and big brands are humongous. And there's going to be some challenge, I believe, within that sector, and it would be really interesting to see how that plays out. But I think at the moment it's it's thrown up a significant amount of challenges. And it goes back to my point of we just need to be informed from a regulatory perspective, but from an ingredient and a manufacturing perspective, and actually try and make those marginal gains. And actually, we're not gonna fix everything, but we need to try and be ethical in our development. We need to do what's right for the consumer, and we need to kind of push everyone in the industry along. So yeah, we're just using our network, we're using experts, we're trialing and testing and trying to just be as informed as possible because we don't know which way it's going to go. On one end, we work with a very large brand where we could be acutely affected by this change, but also on the other end, we're designing product with a startup which we need to make it fit for the future. So you have to be really dynamic and agile in this space to make sure that what you're doing is right.
Yeah, and it also sounds that collaboration is key as well to kind of helping. Sebastian, where can product developers go to get help or support with these changes? John's kind of mentioned there about kind of a collaborative approach in terms of the ingredients that they could be using. Where do you think that they could get kind of more support?
Yeah, sure. I think it's essential to consider available industry resources, such as the brilliant webinar we have going on right now. This is probably the best sort of free tool and resource to have. I think secondly, FSA is always the place to go to for all new regulation changes and tools. I think what they do is brilliant. Everything is up to date, and every tool that is needed is all there. I think thirdly, engaging with specialized consultants, they are there to help, or regulatory compliance experts who can sort of streamline the process of meeting sort of the legal requirements and product reformulation standards, which can be quite complex, as we all know. I think, as John has mentioned, sort of collaborating with the right sort of suppliers and experts in that field, such as our clean label solutions. I think our solutions can help support with HFSS regulations and more. To simplify the reformulations, we also provide our free HFSS calculator to help developers track and adjust their products based on nutritional profiles. And also, I think quite a significant topic that is being discussed all over sort of IT side is use of AI. I think currently a number of software developers are looking into how this can be adapted into food industry across all levels. I don't have any insight just yet, but I'm sure, and I've seen significant talks around that area to use AI across tools that will help us sort of narrow down the areas to improve, to focus on whether this is HFSS or reducing sugar and salt as a general.
No, that's amazing. There's lots of advice in there. So we've spoken a little bit about HFSS there, and kind of the main goal of HFSS is around kind of the nutritional value of products. But on social media and in kind of traditional media as well, we're seeing a bit of a growing concern around the degree of processing in foods. And this is really adding another level of complexity to the conversation of the food industry, particularly as kind of non-HFSS foods would kind of be classed as UPFs and vice versa. So John, just starting off, why do you think that UPFs have become such a big concern for public health at the moment?
I think there has been some studies in this area with the negative effects of certain ingredients that they have on the body, on the collation of these ingredients to create products that are addictive in nature. So yeah, there is definitely some studies there that would back them up, but back up the kind of the concern for public health. But I think there's more to go in that space. I think I'd want a lot more insight. It's the greyest of grey areas for me at the moment. As a business, I can see Lewis chuckling because we've had to chat about this, and actually, you know, I think at both ends you understand, but there feels like there's a 60% in the middle that we haven't really got right yet, or we haven't challenged enough. We haven't got enough studies to give us a clearer insight into what's appropriate. And yeah, as a business, we're just focused really on nutritional balance. We don't want to focus about taking all ingredients out. It's about using our culinary expertise to build the products right first time, or to reformulate them in the most ethically way possible. So yeah, it's a hard one to answer that. There is definitely some insight out there that comes back to public health, but you know, I think it's a hot topic at the moment, and I think it comes down to just product design. You know, if you're creating products that do not feel natural from a life perspective, or from a eating quality, or in all of these ways, I think there's a lot of work to do in that space. But certainly it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think you're right that it is quite a grey area at the minute, particularly for the food industry. But how do you think that kind of the UPF debate is influencing consumer product selection and consumer behaviours right now?
I mean, there's lots of people so we've got a few customers already which it's very high on their priority list. You know, it is part of their business strategy to be completely UPF free. So we've had to sit down and create, you know, brand guardrails and ingredient and product guardrails that would fit that. And that's been some quite tough conversations about what is in and what is out. And actually, if you could be really strict, you're really limited. But we've seen lots and lots of food businesses really challenge ingredients and the removal of UPFs and lowering the number of ingredients. You know, the single ingredient cornflake is a really prime example of that, and that push. And you know, then it's opened up a humongous debate then around fortification, whether actually it's the right thing to do when it's, you know, 400% more expensive than the previous product. So actually, it then opens up a new can of worms. So we're in a ever changing landscape with UPF. So yeah, and we need whether that's regulation or we need some more insight to be able to properly steer us in the right direction.
Absolutely, because I think right now it is very much a consumer driven trend, but thinking back to kind of regulation, as you've just mentioned there, Lewis, do you think that UPFs could ever be regulated against?
Yeah, I think it's $1 million question that everyone seems to ask. And I think I'd say to start with that UPFs are already regulated largely by all the safety and information law that we've currently got. They're regulated by HFSS. You know, majority of HFSS products are UPF. It comes back to what you were saying, is there something beyond nutrition where we should be targeting products that are not HFSS but UPF in policy? And that's a question that I think will take time to unravel. And there are methods for identifying UPF, so largely looking at ingredient lists and seeing whether you've got certain markers that might be associated with processing. But I think that's going to be a long-term conversation. It's going to depend on these, like the legal case that we've seen in the US, and whether you can get an objective definition. And I think there's quite a big misconception when it comes to regulating UPFs generally, because you've got some countries that might claim to regulate UPF, and that is for the most part true, but that regulation is always based on nutrient thresholds. So where you've got warning labels in Latin America, that's still based on nutrient thresholds. You've got a tax in Colombia. Similarly, it applies to ultra-processed food categories, but it still comes back to nutrient value. So for me, there's going to be a lot of conversation about the nervous system, its flaws, how can you refine it? But I think nutrition is going to be a part of that journey, and whether it circles back around to nutrition in the long run, it's potential.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of crossover there then, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like an overlapping system. Then they seem to be pitted against each other, these concepts, but really they are closely linked.
Yeah. So Sebastian, from your experience, do you have any strategies for kind of developing both then healthier and also kind of less processed products?
Yeah, sure. I think, there's a huge scope of variabilities across NPD, EPD. We are dealing with less and more complex products with less and more ingredients in it. But generally speaking, I think, using simple natural ingredients like whole grains and plant-based proteins to sort of minimize the additives within the products. That sort of relates to what Lewis just said about nutritionally dense substitutes. Secondly, techniques. Again, that really depends on the product and processes, but techniques like fermentations or high pressure processing to sort of extend the shelf life and sort of replace preservatives within products is probably an area to sort of consider. Replacing animal products with plant-based options like oat milks or pea proteins that sort of relates again to nutritionally dense substitutes. Fourth, probably reformulating with clean label ingredients, sort of looking at the functionality of ingredient substitutes to sort of lower unhealthy ingredients while sort of maintaining the texture, the sort of organoleptic properties of products. And lastly, I think focusing on ethically sourced, nutritionally dense ingredients, I think that's a really key part. Consistently thinking about sustainability and how that sort of impacts, the sort of food standards as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sebastian. Okay, so just before we finish this webinar, I'd like to just go around the room and get a final piece of advice from our panelists on how can the food industry and product developers kind of prepare for this up and coming regulatory landscape. So John, I'm going to come to you first. Your final piece of advice.
Yeah, I would look to the past, and although it's going to be super challenging what we've got coming up in front of us, don't see the negatives. See the positive change that can happen. Collaborate, use your network, get into the detail, analyze your products, your ranges, and really understand what changes need to be made. Do it for the better, or look at that opportunity where there's gaps to go and innovate, create product from the ground up that's right first time, that delivers something new for the customer, that gives them healthier choices that are more sustainable and better for us and the planet. So yeah, I'd face into it, get stuck in, and use every one and every ingredient and every opportunity that you have around you to go down the drains and create great product.
Thank you, John. And Lewis, your final piece of advice?
Yeah, I think I'd echo a lot of what John said there, with collaboration so important, especially at new product development stage. And it's not something we always see a regulatory lens put on at the beginning, but it's so important when you are picking ingredients or if you're attempting reformulation. I'd also say keeping on top of things is so important. Like, we've got a team at Camden that, it's even a struggle for us all full-time working to keep on top of things. So we do a lot of work with horizon scanning with clients, where we keep on top of research and all the laws that are changing. But if you don't know what's changing and keeping up with that, you end up getting caught right at the end when you've got deadlines. So really, it's keeping that awareness piece going. And to come back to what John said again at the beginning, in that regulations, they don't appear out of thin air. They're really about meeting some of these challenges related to people and planet. So it's almost using those as the guardrails for innovation rather than just assuming that they're a barrier.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lewis. And Sebastian.
I think from my perspective, and having the sort of culinary background as well, I think is probably two pieces of advice. One for new product developers. I think we are living in a wonderful sort of industry. We are constantly challenged. If we weren't, then it will be boring. We've come through a number of challenges that we were faced when it comes to regulations, whether this is a new brief from our clients. They are all challenges, and we'll come through it. We'll find a solution sooner or later. It's the beauty of science, I think. We constantly find new solutions, new ingredients, new substitutes, which is brilliant. So the work will continue, and we'll break through it sooner or later, and the products will be developed, and they will be nutritionally dense, and they will be tasty. But then from consumer perspective, I think it's all worthwhile. Sort of looking at the back of pack is crucial. But then I think it's important to also indulge yourself into a sort of a normal full fat product. Try those flavors, and I think they should stay on the shelves in the supermarkets. Of course, there should be the right balance, and there should be the lower content of salt and sugar and etc. But I think keeping the sort of a genuine product, I would like to see them in 10 years' time on the shelf life. The same content of fat and sugar, so that we can try them again, so they stay the same within the same organoleptic standards. I think we should sort of take everything with the right balance at the end of the day.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sebastian. So I'm going to bring the panel to a close there. There was a lot that was discussed there, but I think collaboration and innovation seems to be kind of the core themes coming out of today, and some key ways that you can really kind of tackle the regulatory changes that are happening this year and in the future. So thank you to our panelists for joining us today, and thank you all for watching. I hope that you've learned something and that you've been able to take some actionable advice back to your kitchens with you. You will all be receiving an email with a recording of this webinar on. So if you do have any additional thoughts or comments, you can reply to that email, and we'll get back to you. They'll also have Lewis and John's and Sebastian's contact details on as well if you want to get in touch directly with them. So thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you on our next webinar.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Take care.
Bye.